Good evening and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It's Wednesday, April 1st, and we are still in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. And like we always do here on the deal, I'm going to jump right in and start with our resident political science professor, Val Atkinson. I have him on the phone with us tonight. And Val, I just want to as quickly as possible get caught up on what's going on. Again, it's Wednesday, April 1st. We're a full month into this. First of all, welcome back to the deal and give us an update on what's going on today.
Well, Ed, it's good to be here. I'm hoping that everyone is adhering to their local and national leaders, telling them or advising them how to go about protecting themselves and their loved ones. That is through social distancing, being careful about sanitizing and washing hands, wear masks if you have them, and just be cautious about your travels. If you don't have to go outside, don't. Whether there's been a stay-at-home order or not, really try to minimize your travels as much as possible. And I'm hoping that everybody is adhering to that. I guess the latest thing that I've heard, Ed, is that Governor DeSantis of Florida is finally joining the rest of his compadres, colleagues, other governors, most of them, who's given a stay-at-home order. He's been fighting that because he's been a big-time supporter of his friend Donald Trump, which has been trying to minimize the effects of COVID-19, which he cannot do. Mm-hmm. But he thinks that he can by not talking about the severity of the pandemic. And for some reason, there's been a pattern of thought from the beginning that if we don't show the scary numbers, if we don't inform people as to where we are and how bad things are likely to be, they can't get scary projections out there. And maybe they won't feel so bad, and maybe they'll feel good enough to go back to work or go back shopping or whatever. And I'm sad to say that that is a recipe for disaster for a country like the United States of America.
Yeah.
And we've got to move away from that. And I'm glad the governor of Florida has seen fit to issue a stay-at-home order that takes effect for 30 days. And hopefully the rest of the states that haven't done so will follow his suit.
Yeah. Let's backtrack a little bit to yesterday. I tried not to watch it, and I only watched a little bit of it. I couldn't take it. The president did his usual daily brief, and so I turned it off because I was just so frustrated. And when I woke up this morning, a lot of the pundits were saying that, oh, the president's finally made a turn. He's finally talking as if, this is serious or whatever. I was actually disappointed that people took it that way. I think, I know people are saying, we're all in this together, whatever. But I'm still critical because The president also took a turn in that press conference, and he went back to the impeachment. So this morning, when I went on Twitter, people like Geraldo Rivera and some other folks were saying, "Oh, had the president not been impeached, he could have taken action on COVID-19." Have you seen any of that, and what do you make of that argument that they're making?
Yeah, well, I saw a recording, a tape of that, and what was said started being said by the Vice President Pence. They were drawing the analogy of timelines of major events happening, when the president know and what did he know, and what he could have done had he known. The president, he jumps on any opportunity to make a point. And that's when the president said, if I hadn't had to address the impeachment fiasco, he called it a hoax. If I hadn't had to address that, maybe I could have done something earlier. And it flies right in the face, Ed, of what he said initially about China not telling us and keeping the pandemic a hoax. A secret too long. Had we known earlier about that, had they called us in, we could have done a better job in our country here. Mm-hmm. It's always somebody else. It's always something else. And I've never seen anything like that. I guess the last time I've been exposed to something like that was in grade school, when you always had some kid that everything that happened, it was always somebody else's fault.
Yep.
or it must have been somebody in the back of the room did that. It wasn't me. They're never responsible for anything that happens, and you can have them on tape, whether it's video or audio, it doesn't matter. It still wasn't me.
It's incredible.
And it's so sad. It's so sad that this guy is the president of the United States and behaving in this manner. But I'll say this, and maybe I can wrap it up by saying, it's a little easier to understand if you accept the fact that Donald Trump knows that he knows nothing about the public sector. He knows nothing about governing. He knows nothing about being president of the United States. What he thinks he knows something about is selling. He is a good salesman, and I used to be affiliated with the United States Army Recruiting Command, and that is selling as well. So I hesitate to even use the word because he sullies the name of selling. What he does. Donald Trump is not a salesman. He's a con man.
Right.
But he is an expert con man. I've never seen anybody to top him. This guy is good at conning people.
Yeah.
He has the ability to listen to what you're saying or listen at what's being presented to him, and he filters that through his mind, and then something tells him how to respond in such a way that it's beneficial to his overall strategy of selling his idea, of promoting his brand. So, it's something automatic. He doesn't even have to think about it.
Right.
That whatever is being said, whatever happens, he goes through that and says, oh, yeah, that's why I was short at doing what I was doing. It was because of the impeachment. It was China. China was too secretive, but it's just so sad that his enablers, and I'm adding one group to his enablers. We always talk about Steve Miller and Bannon and Roger and Manafort and all of those people who are supposed to have been the enablers of Donald Trump, to include Moscow Mitch. I'm adding one more person or group to his enablers. And for all of those listening to me out there, Ed, or watching me, what I want want you to do if you voted for Donald Trump, go and look in your wife's or your husband's mirror, and you will see the person who is responsible for Donald Trump's malbehavior.
Wow. That's a mouthful. Look, I want to remind the folks you're looking at and listening to The Deal with Ed Clark. I'm your host, and we're fortunate again to have Val Atkinson in. So every Wednesday night, you should, hopefully, if he's available, hear from Val Atkinson. And tonight, obviously, we're talking about current status of COVID-19 in the United States. And Val saw a real sobering number right before I came in the studio. It said that we were over 200,000 diagnosed. I didn't see the latest death count, but we're leading the world, obviously, in the number of people who have been exposed at this point. I still say it's a little too late to say that Donald Trump, he keeps trying to take credit. Let me reframe this. He keeps trying to take credit for doing a great job. So now his latest thing is if we keep it from under 1 million, then he's done a great job, because yesterday at the conference, the other news was Fauci said that he anticipated between 100 and 200,000 people dying. Number one, what do you make of that number? Have you seen any other reports of numbers, approaching that? But obviously there was one study that said there could be as many as 1 million people who die.
What Dorothy and Fauci are saying is that if we continue the mitigation points that we have been suggested to continue, that the number of deaths should be somewhere between 1 and 2.5, 100,000 and 2.5.
250,000. Yeah.
That's if we continue this track of doing what we're supposed to do. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, and we get out of hand and we go back to work or go back to school too soon, and people who've been cleared get diagnosed as having COVID-19, that number of deaths could skyrocket exponentially up to the millions. And I just want to throw out a couple of figures that have been thrown out to have somebody to get a feel for how bad this really is. We lost 58,000 in Vietnam. In 9/11, it was about 3,500. In World War I, it was about 100,000. In World War II, it was 400,000. 750,000 in the Civil War, discounting both sides. This thing has the potential of killing more people than all of the wars we've ever had in this country combined.
It's incredible.
Incredible. And that's how serious this is. And it is no time to have an administration that is long on making money and short on protecting citizens.
Yeah.
And that's what they are about. That's why they wanted us to get back to work as soon as possible, to get back into normality as soon as possible. Their actions are driven by Wall Street numbers instead of driven by Main Street fears and needs. And that is unfortunate, but that's where we are right now. And that is why some of your more independent, democratic, capitalistic countries around the globe aren't doing as well as some of the other countries that are not that way.
Right.
It's because we are decentralized too much. That's why Donald Trump is not doing as much as he should be doing. He's throwing it back to the states. Well, this is not a states' rights issue. COVID-19 doesn't recognize political lines or geographical boundaries having to do with states or whatever. And we need an approach for that. You
Right.
know, when we send our tax monies in, it is not just used to protect Georgia or North Carolina or Michigan from an attack by the Soviet Union or the People's Republic of China.
But, you know, I'm glad you
Our money goes to the military to protect us from any and
everybody. Yeah, right. I'm glad. I'm aware that one of the caveats of getting this $1,200 stimulus, which is taxpayer money, is that you have to have already filed a tax return. And I just read a couple of stories right before we came on that said that people were having difficulty because they were on disability or whatever else of filing a return electronically because they don't have any income to be able to file a return. So there's a monkey wrench in this.
I'll tell you, it's as though some of the bean counters and slicksters were already had this in mind when they wrote the bill and the conditions. The devil is always in the detail. I felt, I can't say I knew, but I felt something like this was going to happen, and it always happens to the least of us. The people who need the money most, who is going to be hurting the worst, are the ones who are going to have the difficulty getting this money, and it should not be. It's unbelievable that some people who, you know how it is with poor folks, is some people have spent that money already and the checks haven't even gone out.
Sure.
And what's going to happen, that's going to be delayed significantly. Now, from what I understand, if you are accustomed to, like I've done on occasions, ask for an extension, but you've honored those extensions and you have gone ahead and you've paid your taxes. For an example, if you file for 2018 taxes and you paid that in 2019, and you are going to take an extension, you're not going to pay your taxes by the 15th of July this year because it's been extended already from April 15th to July 15th. So they're not saying they're going to hold your check until you pay your taxes because they're not due until July, and they said checks are going to start going out in a few weeks. So, but if you paid your 2018 taxes in 2019, then you have a record on file. They will send you a check.
Right.
But if you haven't paid taxes in years, or if you've never paid taxes, then you need to start some action to let them know who you are, where you are, and what your particular circumstances happen to be, so that they can move things around and get your check out to you.
Well,
but if you have a record, if you own record, have things paid, you should be okay.
Well, I have a prediction, though. I have a prediction that probably about 50% of people that are eligible are going to get that in that first, be successful in that first 3-week period when they send them out, because they're going to find out that there are a lot of people that either one have not filed in 18 or 19, or are in the situation as one person I was reading in I think it was in New York Times, where the person again was on disability. They don't have enough income to file normally. When they tried to file, it kicked it back, saying that you don't have enough. So they tried H&R Block, they tried the IRS website. All of them said you got to have some income to be able to file electronically. You got to file it on paper. So now you got to send a paper return, and that's going to take 3, 4, 5 weeks just to process that paper return, and then that means another length of time before they get their check.
Absolutely. So my advice to those folks, Ed, would be don't spend it before you get it.
Right.
Be prepared to go through a couple of extra hoops, and be prepared to have your check extended for a couple, 3 more weeks, more so than the average person. But I think in the long run you'll get it. But hopefully you're not dependent upon it to the degree that it's going to really hurt.
Yeah.
The extra 2 weeks are going to hurt.
Yeah, yeah. I just have a feeling that more people are going to be hurt than they're anticipating, and I think it's going to hurt in some of those red states that they were counting on. And I don't want to make it completely political, but obviously, when, like you said, when it got over to the Senate and Moscow, Mitch had the opportunity to make this a little bit easier for people to get money. Had already seen over in the House people like Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott were already complaining that it was too much help for people, and which I don't understand. But I don't even want to get into that. I want to switch gears real quick before we run out of time. I want to talk about very disturbing trend of churches that were still holding services when they were told not to. In a couple of cases, one in Florida I saw this morning where a pastor was actually arrested because he was continuing to encourage people to come to services. And on top of that, I saw a case out in Washington State. This is after Washington State already had COVID. A church decided to go ahead and have choir practice, and out of 75 people who came to the practice, 53 have COVID. 2 have died in recent days. Val, what do you make of these churches, particularly evangelical churches, that are pushing the envelope on this and wanting to still continue to have services?
Well, I hate to say it, Ed, but it is a holdover, and it is part and parcel of the same thing that Donald Trump and his cronies are motivated by. Is the almighty dollar. Unfortunately, that some of the churches ostensibly about the business of spirituality, but unfortunately it comes down that some of them are primarily motivated by the almighty dollar. They'll do anything. There's one case of a reverend in South Carolina that was caught using vans, and he had about 3 of them in motion. He drove one himself, going around picking up parishioners and bringing them back to the church.
Wow.
And that is a mega violation there. First of all, having these people in the van sitting close to each other, and then having them to be in the church, taking them back. It's unbelievable that people would go to this extreme to continue the flow of dollars. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it either, Val. I've seen some stories similar to that too, and the idea that you would put people at risk. I know faith is one thing. I'm not even going to get into an argument with anybody about their faith and what they believe in prayer and whether or not prayer is going to help in this situation. If you believe that prayer is going to help, I want you to do that. I want you to, put every effort into that. At the same time, common sense is going to have to prevail. We're going to have to take measures to have the social separation that we need to have to arrest the virus. The virus can be transmitted person to person. It requires personal contact. One last disturbing thing that I saw today, Val, was that there were a number of ventilators that the Pentagon had that have been sitting on pallets and hadn't been distributed because the White House didn't know they had to tell the Pentagon where to send these ventilators to. I know there's been a lot of talk about ventilators in the news over the last, month. What is the latest that you know about ventilators? I know the state of New York really wants to get 30,000, but so far I think they got like 500. What can you tell me about that?
Well, there's 2 things. There's a ventilator knockoff that's being produced, and I believe, I'm not sure, but it's in the Midwest, and I can't remember which state it is right now. But it's called a hood, and they're placing this hood. It takes quite a bit of effort to place the hood over the head of the patient, but it's far more comfortable for the patient, and it is just as effective, and it is a fraction of the cost.
Right.
And they are working on that. They're working around the clock. They can't get enough hoods out of the door. They're asking for people to come in to help run extra shifts that seems more promising than many other things. On the other side of the picture, there's a story being investigated, so we can't say whether or not it's true or not yet, but a story being investigated that the administration is sending masks and ventilators in small numbers to Thailand and to Italy, and that those things could be used here in places like New York and L.A. And Chicago. And we've just got to get our priorities straight.
Yeah.
We have got to get to the point that we understand how important it is for an economy to stay on top, so you'll have the funds for our national defense and do all the other things that we want to do to keep a democracy going and be a proud nation and be a world leader and all those kinds of things. But you still have to have the capability to protect the primary principle in your nation, which is your people.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't protect them, then all the rest doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter at all.
I heard, and I'll leave you with this, Ed. A gentleman, Bill Gates, was talking about, this was back in 2015, when he was saying, if you don't do something right now, when the next epidemic comes, you won't be able to handle it. And you need to be able to do something right now. This is back in 2015 when he was talking about that. And recently, he's been basically quoted as saying that regardless of how bad the economy gets, if it goes all the way down to the ground and we have to start over and build again, it is possible to rebuild another economy and do the kind of things that we need to do to keep our country going. But once a person is succumbed to COVID-19, it's difficult to bring them back from death. So we need to start figuring out where our priorities are.
Yeah.
Are we gonna say it's okay to lose a couple of million people for the sake of keeping Wall Street in high numbers?
Right.
Are we going to say, let's save every life we can, and after we've saved it and we're on the other side of this pandemic, let's work on our economy and get that back as strong as we can get it.
Wow.
And right now, unfortunately, I know where our leadership is in the White House.
Right.
They are trying to save the economy. That's number one in their mind, and they're making too many horrid decisions, putting the economy before people.
Wow. Yeah, you said a mouthful, but that is where we are right now. Folks, you've been listening to Val Atkinson. He's the host of Connections on Foxy 107, 104 here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Val, can you give me a programming note? What's coming up for Sunday's program on Foxy 107, 104?
Well, as you know, Ed, being my trusted co-host for the last 25 years, we've got our marching orders about social distancing and staying at home, and we're trying to adhere to that. So we're taping our shows on Fridays now, and they will be played back at our regular broadcast time, which is 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings. And people can go online and hear that all over the world. This Sunday, we have a special show we'll be having as our guest Representative G.K. Butterfield from North Carolina's 1st Congressional District. And Representative Butterfield is the former past chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Before going to Congress, he was a Superior Court judge. Among other things, he was an attorney, graduate from the School of Law at North Carolina Central University, my alma mater. And, of course, he's a personal friend of the station, my friend and your friend, Ed. Mm-hmm. And we're proud to have him on as a guest to talk to his constituents to the citizens of North Carolina and the citizens of the United States of America.
Yep. Well, that's fortunate that we can call on people like G.K. Butterfield to give us the lowdown. And like Val said, that's heard Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. on Foxy 107, 104 over the air. But you can also stream it live if you go to Foxy's website. So from anywhere in the world. And this week we're going to record it and try to make it available after it airs at 8 a.m., at least parts of it if we can, to make sure that folks can hear what Congressman G.K. Butterfield has to say, because he's in the know. He's up there in Washington. He knows what those bills look like. He's getting other information that we can't get here. So, Val Atkinson, thank you so much for sitting in again, and hopefully next Wednesday you'll be available for next Wednesday. We'll definitely be on Sunday for our regular show with Connections.
I will, and thank you, Ed.
All right, thank you, Val. You've been listening to Val Atkinson. He's the host of Connections on Foxy 107, 104. He's former political science professor at North Carolina Central University. We're going to take a small break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from Sheila Cotten, who's a professor at Michigan State University, Preeti Waas, who's a business owner here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Troy Lee, who is a citizen of Raleigh, North Carolina, talking about his quarantine experience. You're listening to The Deal.
Why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others.
For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. Fortunately, I know some people in high places, and one of the people I know is Professor Sheila Cotten. She's at Michigan State University. She's done a lot of research around technology and different aspects of technology. And I wanted to have her on to talk about a number of different things. But first of all, Sheila Cotten, welcome to The Deal.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Well, one of the things that prompted me to call you is I saw a story about a nursing home that was using technology to allow people to call and talk to folks who you can't have visitors right now. We know the situation with COVID-19. You just should not be exposing older Americans and vulnerable people to the virus potentially. And one of the methods that we're using at this particular nursing home is Skype. But one of the things that I know you know about is sort of this technological divide between older Americans and younger Americans and how they use technology. Have you thought any at all about how we could leverage technology to communicate with some of these people who are shut in?
I have been thinking about that a lot lately. Older adults are already at risk of isolation in current day society, even before you throw a pandemic on top of it. And this pandemic is only going to exacerbate that. So we have to think about different ways that we could use technology to help older adults to maintain their contact, their communication with their social ties. One of the things that some of my research, along with my students over the years has shown, is that older adults still prefer face-to-face contact with their social ties. They want to be in the same room, in the same presence with those social ties. But in times of, this pandemic that we're in right now, that just isn't really realistic for many older adults who are such a vulnerable population or at high risk of catching COVID. And so thinking about ways to use technology to enhance their contact, their communication, maintaining those social ties is really important. Now, one of the things, though, that we have to keep in mind is that many older adults are still on the wrong side of the digital divide. And what that means is that some older adults, one, don't even have access to the technology
Right.
to be able to use Skype or FaceTime or any of the other social networking applications that allow you to use, the visual and the auditory communication. And so that's really a challenge. Even if older adults do have access to technologies like a smartphone or a tablet or computer, sometimes it can still be a problem. So, for example, if they have not used Skype before and their family wants to use Skype, how do they learn how to get access to Skype? How do they become familiar with using Skype or some other different program that they want to use is really challenging for some older adults. And so that digital divide still exists. And so we have to think about what are the technologies that have kind of the lowest bar to cross in terms of helping them to stay engaged with their social ties. So, for example, talking on the phone is probably the lowest bar. Most older adults have access to some type of telephone.
Right.
Now, you mentioned nursing homes as one example earlier. I can tell you from some of my research over the years, nursing home residents are less likely to have access to their own telephones than are, say, individuals in assisted or independent living communities.
Right.
Because generally, by the time you move into a nursing home, you're much frailer. And so you might not either have the cognitive or the physical abilities to use a phone by yourself. And so thinking about the types of assistance that individuals in these communities would need is really critical.
I didn't think about that. That is a really good point. I'm just concerned about that social isolation, though, particularly for that population that doesn't have access. In your research, this whole notion of the digital divide between the generations or whatever, is it because uh, you know the telephone still works, right? You can make a phone call. This whole notion of everybody being on FaceTime and Skype and those kind of things for young people, it seems ubiquitous. Every time I turn around, I can be sitting at a table in a restaurant and I'll see young people sitting with other young people and they're FaceTiming somebody else or they're in their phone and folks in my age cohort, we're not so into that. That's going to play into it some, right? I mean, that some folks just, will find it hard to move towards those technologies just because the generation they're in.
Yes, it's definitely a generational issue. If we think about when these technologies became disseminated into society, for kids today, I have a 14-year-old daughter, by the time she was born, the devices were everywhere. It was natural for her to start playing with the iPad or playing with my smartphone, almost from infancy. But for the average older adult who's over 65, or even thinking over 80 in particular, you do see a sharp decline in terms of use of digital technology. They're what we're referred to as digital immigrants because they weren't born into a time when these technologies were pervasive. Telephone, was pervasive, but not the digital technology that many younger generations are using so prevalently today. And so, one thought is that as, for example, the younger generation age into older adulthood, that they'll be more comfortable with technology. But one of the things that I have noticed for years is that technology continues to evolve. And so I think there's always going to continue to be a digital divide. Like you may be very comfortable with your Android or your iPhone today, but what's going to happen when you're 80 and there's a new device that comes out and you need to upgrade your phone? One of the challenges for older adults currently is when they need to upgrade their devices or when passwords need to be changed or when devices start working, they have to have assistance to help them often to correct those issues so that they can still stay connected and using technologies to enhance their lives.
Yeah, those are all good points. Again, that raises another concern just in my mind as you were talking about how do you train people in when you can't get to them. I mean, it's going to be almost impossible to introduce maybe new technology to folks in this situation where you have to be socially distant from people. Any thoughts on that? I mean, I'm wondering. I'm trying to think out of the box here. Is there room for maybe doing some train the trainer and things like that, where people who are already engaged in those types of facilities or with that population could maybe train those people on how to use devices.
Yeah, definitely. I think train the trainer is certainly an option because chances are those trainers may be younger staff that are working, particularly in assisted living, for example, or in nursing homes. But as I said before, I think the usage levels are still going to be much lower in
Right.
nursing homes. Um, Increasing numbers of people in assisted living and certainly in independent living have access to smartphones and tablets. It's one of the things that we found in a big study that we did a few years ago is that the number of tablet computers in particular has been increasing and also the number of smartphones. And so if you think about what technologies they have available, I think that's kind of a baseline to think about where you can start in terms of training people to help individuals who are in residential type communities like that. I know that there are different programs around the country, like K4 Connect, which is actually out of Raleigh. NC State grad actually started this company. He is working with senior living communities around the country to put in their technology, and it's much easier for older adults to use. It's either on a smartphone or a tablet.
Okay.
And it allows them to stay connected much easier. But that's in place already in many of these communities, and so the people have already been trained on how to use it. But in terms of a pandemic right now, if somebody doesn't have those technologies, I think it's much more challenging to even get them up to a baseline.
Hmm.
Most of the stores are closed. How do you even, if you've never had an iPad, how do you go out and get one? Thousands of stores closed.
Sure. Yeah.
Does Walmart sell iPads? But then to actually be able to learn how to use it and set it up, if you don't have some assistance, it's a real challenge. You mentioned what are some things that we could do. I do wonder about like local television stations or PBS stations if they could have some sort of training programs that could go out that could target areas where there are higher proportions of older adults that are living.
Hmm.
Maybe that could help.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I know I wanted to talk to you for some reason. I knew you would have some answers. Yeah, I want to remind the folks you're looking at the deal with Ed Clark, and we're fortunate to have Sheila Cotten. She's a professor currently at Michigan State University. She studies all things technology, and we're talking to her about how to engage some of our older citizens in use of technology during this time of COVID-19. But beyond that, in the time that we have left, I want to talk to you about just other things that you're doing as well. Like I said, you're at Michigan State University. Can you talk to me about what your current role is and what you do, and then what you're looking forward to do in the future?
I'm a professor in the Department of Media and Information, and I'm also the Associate Chair for Research in my department. And in those roles, I study technology use across the life course, so from the very young to the very old, and what are the impacts on people's lives, particularly in terms of health and well-being and social connections, and also workforce. So right now, we're doing a project with Darmeshi, who's in a different department in my college. We're looking at digital overuse across the life course, so from young teenagers all the way up to individuals in their 70s and 80s, and how they strive to lessen their use if they perceive that they are overusing technologies, and what are the impacts of that overuse on their lives.
Hmm.
And then I'm also doing a big project that's funded by the National Science Foundation right now with a big interdisciplinary team. We're looking at workforce impacts of autonomous vehicles, and we're focusing on the long-distance trucking and taxi and ride-hailing industries, and trying to determine what are the impacts both on the organizations, but also on the drivers' lives and their opportunities to go into different types of jobs as autonomous vehicles become more pervasive in society. And then this summer, I'll actually transition to Clemson University, and I'll be the Associate Vice President for Research Development there, and really helping to spearhead research, interdisciplinary collaborative teams across the university to try to solve problems in society through research. And so I'm really excited about that upcoming opportunity. Sad to leave my Michigan State family, but I'll still continue those collaborations for many years to come.
Well, I am very impressed with your resume, and I've been knowing you since you were 15 years old. So we go back a long ways, and I don't know if we ever thought back at Harnett Central High School that 40 years, almost 40 years later, we would be doing the roles that we do. But I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to come in and talk with the listeners and viewers on this subject. And uh, obviously we'd like to have you back at some point as this thing progresses, and also to talk about other issues. We talk about a lot of things on the deal. This just happens to be specific to COVID, but Sheila Cotten, thank you so much for participating.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Happy birthday to you.
I've never done this before.
Happy birthday to you.
We're here for Precious.
Happy birthday, dear Precious.
Back on you. Take 4. You may not understand.
Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, this is chapter 32.
Welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark, and again, we've been trying to bring people on to talk about their experiences with coping with COVID-19 in their families on a personal level, but we also want to talk to business owners. I'm fortunate to have a business owner that I actually know. Her name is Preeti Waas. She's from Raleigh, North Carolina, and she makes the best cookies I know in Raleigh. But besides that, she does a lot of other things. Welcome to The Deal. What I want to talk to you about is just tell me about your businesses first, and then we'll talk about how you're coping with COVID-19.
Sure. So as the owner of really 3 micro businesses, or 2 micro businesses and 1 smaller retail location, the retail location is newer, which we opened on the 1st of November 2019. And it is a small little coffee shop located inside of the Pointer YMCA in downtown Raleigh. And that is more of an Indian and American coffee, chai, and snack shop. And that is the face of the business, really. Mm-hmm. We also own Sugar and Spice Kitchen, which is a custom bakery. We take online orders, and we also sell at the North Hills Farmers Market when our market is in season, which is typically from April until November. The third micro business is Jolly Good Jams, where I make unusual jam flavors, and those are sold both at Cheeni downtown and also at Sugar and Spice Kitchen's market stall.
So those are 3 very distinct entities. They're doing different things. You have, I'm sure, rent to pay. You have to make product. You have to try to figure out what kind of customers you're going to have. How do you do that in this climate where from day to day we don't know what's going to happen?
So I heard somebody say online, I'm part of an online business group, and she mentioned the importance of pausing and pivoting. So it's not just making a change in the focus of your business, but you pause first. You pause, you take the temperature, so to speak, of the market. See what's required, what's necessary, how you can be helpful, and then try to change your business according to those needs. And that's what we've tried to do. So first, with the retail location being gone, of course, our rent was still due. And we haven't heard from our landlord yet, but maybe this month I'm going to wait to hear from them until I write that rent check.
Right.
And the second part of that is because we own our own commercial kitchen, it's also a shared kitchen which we rent out space to different food entrepreneurs as well. And we have monthly tenants, and we, about a week into the whole COVID-19 pandemic, I actually wrote to my full-time tenants, my monthly tenants, and told them that their rent would not be due for this coming month. Because I know that as a small business, it's already difficult. The margins are razor thin already. and rent is usually the largest portion of it.
Right.
So we have completely not just deferred rent, but taken rent away from our monthly tenants. That's one thing we've done. Excuse me. And the other thing is now we have all this inventory, and we've had all this inventory because we were cooking and baking on a daily basis. And with people not being able to go to the grocery stores, or really should not go to the grocery stores if they can help it, what we've tried to do is, again, meet a need and try to be helpful within our neighborhoods. So we are now offering grocery delivery, prepared foods delivery, and that's how we're trying to stay visible still, I guess, to our customers so they don't completely forget.
Right.
When all of this is over, does it still exist?
No, those are all good ideas. So let's talk about realistic here. You know, for micro businesses like you have, how long can you survive? I mean, I know people are talking about another 30 days at least before this thing kind of peaks. What are you looking at in terms of viability? Is it possible that you may have to, say, close one of those businesses and again, like you said, shift or focus until things sort back out? Or what's realistic as far as timeline for you guys?
Realistically, in my particular situation, being that I don't have as much overhead as most restaurants do, and I did really streamline my business even before COVID, just so that I wouldn't have the burden of so much overhead all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So having done that already was preemptive, and I didn't realize just how useful it was going to be. But having already changed the focus of my business that way, not having as much overhead, I would say I'm able to last longer than, say, a bakery that has a full-time retail location and staff to pay.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Have you been hearing from other business owners that are in the food prep micro, business community, and what are they saying about their viability, and have they shifted focus as well?
Well, they've been trying to shift focus, but again, if you take a specialty business like a cupcake bakery and somebody who's doing wedding cakes or event cakes, their business is completely gone.
Right.
Because all the events have been canceled. And not only that, it is really quite gut-wrenching because so many of them who were doing events are being contacted by their clients and their customers to have their deposits refunded.
Right.
So it's like a double whammy. With no income coming in, they're also having to return deposits. And that's wiping a lot of people out.
Yeah.
So in terms of viability and how long, it would depend business to business. But I would say even an independent contractor running a wedding cake business or an event cake business is not going to last longer than 30 days.
Wow. That's very, sobering to think about. You put all your heart and effort into a business, and then, it can all be wiped away in a matter of 30 days. Let me talk to you on a personal note, because I said I also want to talk to you about your family and folks like, that you're close to. How are you faring, being locked in for the most part? And then I know you have family in another country, in India. I know they're on complete lockdown. Prime Minister Modi put the entire country on lockdown. Have you heard from those people back in India?
Yes, thank goodness for a platform like WhatsApp. And we are very closely in contact. And it is very difficult for an Indian family because they're not really, their homes, their apartments are not really set up for you to stay locked in, if you would. They depend on going out a lot.
Right.
Grocery shopping is done on a daily basis, not on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. You leave home not just to go out to work, but you leave home every single day for just for that day's meal.
Mm.
And so that's been an adjustment for them. But again, I will say this, Vince, we are really, really privileged, and that includes my family in India, that we are privileged to be able to stay home. We have homes in which to sequester ourselves. We have the means to be able to feed ourselves and our families, and so many people just don't have that.
Right. We are very fortunate. You're right about that. In the time we got left here, I want you to tell people how they can find Cheeni, how they can find Jolly Good Jams and all your sugar and spice, all your micro businesses. And then can you order to have stuff shipped? Because I've had stuff shipped to me, and I'm telling you, the best chocolate chip cookies that are available. So tell everybody how to reach out to you and how to get things from you.
Sure. So the easiest thing to do is go to www.cheeniraleigh.com. That's CHEENIRALEIGH.com. And that really gives you a link to our basics, the basic groceries, the chocolate chip cookies, the jams. That's a one-stop shop to get any of that from us, as well as prepared foods, really. Items like dal and rice, which is the Indian lentil soup, ribolita, congee, all kinds of things like that. So that is a good way to find us. You can always call us at 919-421-1774, and we're happy to chat with you. If you're lonely, call us. We'll talk to you about cookies. Okay. If you have if you're baking and if you want to know what step you missed, or if you don't have an ingredient and if you'd like to substitute anything else, call me. I'll chat with you.
And I know you will. So I want to, number one, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Hopefully this message will, find its way to someone. It'll help you generate some business and keep yourself afloat. But also, it'll be some encouragement for people that, there are people out there that are still, trying to make things happen in the community. That whole grocery delivery thing is great, because I know there are a lot of people, especially older folks, who may not have access or whatever. So again, Preeti Waas, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on The Deal.
You're so welcome. Thank you for giving me the platform. And I do want to mention one thing. What we're trying to do to help the community as well is anybody who is home immunocompromised or just unable to feed themselves, please give us a call, send us a message, and we will deliver food to you 100% free of charge.
Oh, that's great. Well, again, thank you so much. You're watching The Deal. We're going to take a break. Welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. And this afternoon, we're fortunate to have someone from Raleigh on with us, Troy Lee. Troy, the reason why I asked you to be on is I wanted to talk to some real folks about how they were dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. Troy, welcome to The Deal.
Hey, I appreciate being here.
Well, part of this thing is just getting over the fact that you're quarantined and cloistered in the house. And I know you work from home already some days a week, but what's it like having to stay in the house, day after day?
So as I would say half introvert, half extrovert, I'm okay staying in the house. I think it gets to a point now where it's like people are probably going crazy because somebody's telling them to stay in the house rather than them choosing not to go out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's fine. I wake up, I have my coffee, I log onto my computer, take the dog out, and I just carry on my day.
You're a lot younger than me, and one of the things that I've seen is a lot of young people not wanting to follow the rules, so to speak, not wanting to stay in the house. What do you think about your generation and how they're dealing with this? Have you talked to any of your other friends who are expressing that maybe they don't think this is as serious as everybody's making it out to be?
I think I'm getting multiple perspectives of people my age. So I have one friend who is kind of still doing certain things that are I would say somewhat risky. Like he's still having his food delivered, he's still having his groceries delivered. Where I'm more, I want to limit the amount of people touching my food. you know.
Right.
So then you have other people who kind of still want to party, they still want to go out. Where I'm just like, I don't want to talk to nobody. And I've kind of been joking with certain people, because I'm a wrestling fan. And Stone Cold Steve Austin said, I think years ago, that I really believe in, and that's don't trust anybody. Because anybody can have it.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that folks aren't taking serious enough, that there is a possibility that somebody may be infected and you have no idea. And
no.
That's where a lot of my concern is that we haven't done enough on a personal level to try to stop the spread of the virus. Now again, you're a lot younger than me. I won't tell people how much younger you are. Have you looked at any of it from the political perspective? The president's on TV every day. He's doing his press conferences or whatever. Have you watched any of that? And if you have, what's your impression of what you're hearing?
I think I watched the State of the Union, the public addresses. I try not to watch every day because I think that negativity is also going to make people sick, and the paranoia is going to increase. But from what I saw, and I mentioned this to my wife, I said, he represents to me the candidate that doesn't have the experience, but still gets the job. So it's like, you go on a job interview and they say, you need more experience. He's the ultimate person that got a job with no experience. So to me, listening to him, he's not really giving us any information. He's just kind of deliberating and making sure everybody around him knows what they're talking about.
Sure.
And honestly, I feel like everybody that's in his cabinet walks into the room with him and feels great because they're the smartest person in the room.
That's a good observation. I want to remind the folks that you're listening to The Deal with Ed Clark, and got on with me Troy Lee, who is I want to talk to some real people out there who are experiencing being locked in and what it's like to not be able to get out, and it's a big change for everybody. So the last I heard, now they're talking about another 30 days, maybe longer, for this to go on. How do you feel about the possibility that it may be another month before we can see clear this? What are your plans on how to get through those 30 days?
Well, for the last 30 days, and I can give you a little, I guess, inside scoop on what happened. So with my job, initially it was an option to go home. And I remember when my team lead came to me and she asked me, how do you feel about it? Because, my wife had health issues and she wanted to make sure I was comfortable. And at first I was like, yeah, I feel pretty good. I wash my hands, I keep my area clean. But then I went to the bathroom and I noticed that some of the sinks were starting to run out of soap. So I said, okay, well, the first two sinks don't have soap. The last two do have soap. So I'm washing my hand at the last two. And somebody else is trying to wash their hands on the first two. And I watched them and I said, well, let me observe this. There's no soap in there. And he just carried on like there was soap and pretended to wash his hands. And I went back to my team lead and I said, you know what? I'm just going to go home. But I think for me, knowing that I can do my job from home keep myself safe, keep my wife safe. I go through a routine. I'm typically okay as long as we got food and we can still go to the grocery store. Like I'm okay.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about your experience going to the grocery store. You're still going out to the grocery store, and how do you feel about that? And I know today there was some talk earlier today about maybe encouraging people to wear a mask if they go out. That hasn't been sort of an edict from the CDC yet, but how do you feel when you go out to the grocery store?
So I went out this morning, actually, right before you called me. Actually, I went out, and it's not overly crowded. They've made some adjustments. When I go in, I'm typically covered from head to toe. I keep my hood on. As you can see, I have my hair in a bun to keep out of my face. I feel like since this virus has broke out, my face, every time I go outside, it starts itching. And it's almost like just urging you to touch your face. But when I go in, I grab one of those little sanitizer wipes, wipe off the bar. I go get the groceries. I don't really go to where there are people. I kind of go around. If somebody does walk next to me, I don't know. I have a habit of turning my back. And I've noticed they made some adjustments. The cashiers now have these little plexiglasses in front of them. Obviously, there's no more toilet paper. Paper towels are almost non-existent as well. But ultimately, most of the food is still there. There are a few things that are not there. Certain meat isn't there. But I don't eat meat, so that's perfectly fine with me. As long as they have fruit and vegetables, I'm good with that. Bring those home, you wash them off, and it's all good. I think I only saw one or two people out with masks, but to me, I don't plan on breathing too deeply into the grocery store.
Right.
And it's like I said, if somebody is next to me, I turn my back and just walk the other way. If I see somebody cough, that whole aisle is canceled.
Right. Understood.
So,
well, like I said, this is a tough time for everybody, and what we're trying to do on the deal is get some real experiences from real people. We're going to take a break.